This segment's purpose is to consider whether public policy typologies can provide unambiguous meaning. In this article, Peter Steinberger considers how there are limitations to policy typologies because of the ambiguity of meaning in the policy world. This questioning of the attempt to make typologies of policies reprises a question policy theorists and analysts necessarily ask themselves regarding the approaches they use. Will social science ever be objective and value-free? Or are we stuck with the same discussions about knowledge that have been with us since at least the ancient Greeks, with questions about epistemology, the approach that understanding the nature and scope of knowledge? There have been three major approaches to knowing. First, there is the Platonic approach, which argues that there is a capital T truth out there, but only a select few can step outside the cave to get it. In other words, only those philosopher kings that are part of the priesthood of revealed knowledge know what is truly going on. The next approach is the Aristotelian approach, whereas truth is observable but prone to error. In other words, it's a small t truth that cannot be completely pinned down because perspectives change subtly. Finally, there are the sophists, who hold that the truth is dependent upon your perspective solely. This perspective can be seen most obviously in deconstructionists, postmodernists, and post-industrialists. In this article, Steinberger notes the limitations of policy typology theories. A key one is that they, to the point in time, have been non-cumulative due to the use of different typologies. Derived from this is that these typologies often provide categorization that overlaps when applied to public policies. And perhaps more pertinent, they are not tested, despite plenty of debate and discussion. In other words, at the time of this article in 1980, there was plenty of smoke, but precious little fire when it came to testing Lowy's policy typology framework, or any other typology for that matter. With this in mind, the author suggests that there is a way out, with the basic premise considered in this paper being that public policy is ambiguous. In Steinberger's words, "We should regard ambiguity not as a defect in understanding, but rather as the most salient and ineluctable characteristic of public policy." Here, most policies are coherently understood and defined in a wide variety of ways, often with two or more entirely different and competing understandings of the policy, its purpose, and its potential impact. Thus, the policy process is a struggle to get one or another meaning established as the accepted one. The meaning of a policy and of its objective characteristics is thus the understandings that participants have regarding the policy's purpose, its potential, impact, and relationships with other policies. In short, this reflects a social construction of reality which locates policy in the social world. Multiple typologies may be considered, even simultaneously, so that the meaning construction process for any one individual may vary based upon how they want to consider a policy. For instance, it would be Lowy's typology where the substantive impact of a policy is considered in terms of how distributive, redistributive, regulatory, or constituent-focused it is. The political impact of policies can be considered in metropolitan areas as to whether it affects an entire area or segments of a geographic area, and is yet another way to consider and typologize policies. Theoretically, economics as a discipline provides insights as to the excludability and rivalry of goods, providing a way of defining policies in terms of whether the government should become involved. Finally, the tangibility or symbolic nature of a good has an impact on how it is approached. Even with all these typological approaches, there are a variety of different ways that research questions may be considered, including how policies are defined as to what is perceived as typical and how certain groups view them. Another question concerns whether certain types of conflicts lead to certain patterns of definitional juxtapositions. In other words, the nature of political conflict drives the way things are considered by the various participants. Finally, there is a question of whether those individuals actually implementing the policy are aware of definitions and whether this influences the outputs and outcomes of that policy. Ultimately, in the words of the author, none of the typologies are antithetical to any of the others. Thus, we may suggest that each typology simply reflects one of the several ways in which policies can be conceptualized. Taken together, they indicate the various salient dimensions of public policy.